The War of Power. 10 years of bloody conflict that came on the heels of 100 years of total collapse. The forces of the light, led by Lews Therin Telamon, clashed against the shadow in 1,000 battles. Dread powers and foul creatures were unleashed upon the world, as each side sought an advantage over the other. The Gleeman would have you believe that the light always triumphs over the shadow, that the good will win simply because their cause is righteous. Nothing can be further from the truth. As the shadow rose up to choke the world, men gathered to oppose it, but slowly they wasted away every advantage they had ever had. They bickered amongst themselves like wayward children, unable to fully unite against their foe. They had no idea how to wage war, let alone how to win war. Being the products of an age of peace, they really had no experience in this area. At last, unable to deceive themselves any longer, they realized that defeat was imminent. In desperation, they tried to find a way of winning, or simply of surviving. The whole of the tower gathered, and many plans were presented to the sitters for consideration. In the end, two plans gained the most traction. Both were desperate and mad in their own way, but perhaps they gained popularity due to the people who presented them rather than their fallibility. Lews Therin Telamon, first among the servants, and Dragon, a war hero and the general of the forces of the light. He wanted to strike at Shayol Ghul, strike at the heart of the Dark One's power, and attempt to seal the bow. He would take an army of warmen and a circle of the most powerful Aes Sedai of the age to try and seal the bow. The outcry against this plan was enormous. No one knew what would happen if such an attempt failed. Many theorized that if the seals were not placed precisely, it would result in a backlash that would free the Dark One. For all this time, during the 100 years of collapse and the war, the Dark One had not been fully freed. His influence upon the world was limited to what he could through the breach. So naturally, everyone was frightened of what could happen if the Dark One was truly freed. Others simply dismissed Lews Therin's plan as arrogant. How could mere men hope to match the works of the Creator? They questioned. The one who greatly opposed this plan was a speaker named Latra Posai Detsume, a powerful lady in her own right. She argued that Lews Therin's plan was too rash, too dangerous, though it is odd that she had to champion her own plan while dismissing the other. Her plan was as follows. She wanted them to construct the two greatest sangreal ever built, one attuned to Saidin and the other to Saidar. They were to take the form of huge statues, and since one could not tote these huge things around, construction of two Ta'angreal to be used as access keys would also need to be done. This mighty weapon would be used to bludgeon their enemies into submission. The good old, "my stick is bigger than yours, so you'd better surrender or I'll pummel you into the ground" approach. Latra went to all the powerful female channelers and convinced them of the inherent danger of Lews Therin's plan. Everyone was concerned about the dangers involved, and she managed to convince all of them not to side with Lews Therin in this matter. This agreement came to be known as the Fateful Concord. Later on, even weaker channelers, female channelers, joined the Fateful Concord, and it became an official thing. The whole of the tower was at an impasse, but it became clear that Lews Therin's plan would not proceed. Since all the women were against it, he could not meet the quota needed for a powerful circle. 7 women were needed, 7 women and 6 men were needed to complete this circle. Thus Lews Therin's plan was thrown out the window and construction of the two Sangreal began, while the men and women of the Aes Sedai ripped at each other's throats. A group of men began to argue for Lews Therin's plan, often disrupting meetings of the hall. These rogues came to be known as the 100 Companions, though they numbered 113 in total. It's possible to fight a war on two fronts. But if your center cannot hold, if your forces are in discord, then you deserve the defeat that you will be dealt. Disaster fell. The Mandred's forces advanced, and the area where construction of the Choden Khal was taking place fell to the shadow. By good fortune, the Forsaken knew nothing of the great power they had within their grasp. Latra's Star Angreal could let one draw enormous amounts of the One power, enough to destroy the world if one was so inclined. I hesitate to think or to imagine what the Forsaken could have done with such power. Samael and Belal also advanced in accordance with the Mandred. Panicked, some sought to make peace with the shadow, and some fools even put it in their minds to set fire to the Hall of the Servants, razing it to the ground. This was the moment when the darkness would defeat the light, for they had outfoxed their foe at every turn. Buried Belmeda, who had turned court in order to gain vengeance against Lews Therin, was simply too much of an asset to the shadow. Now he held a knife to his former ally's throat, and all knew that it was only a matter of time before he slit it. Latra Poseidon sent agents to retrieve the access keys. Her agents were discovered and killed, though news of this did not reach her ears until events had proceeded too much for anyone to do anything. In the face of this threat, the whole of the tower did what it does best. They bickered. Supporters of Lews Therin and those of Latra Poseidon argued constantly until Lews Therin had had enough. He declared that he was proceeding with his plan with or without the female Aes Sedai's help. There was no other avenue open to them. If they did nothing, they would fall, and he will not die kneeling before his fall. The 100 companions rose with him, and they departed. Gathering 10,000 of the women and the 100 companions, this strike force traveled to Shayol Ghul. The women engaged in a fierce battle with the forces stationed at the base of the mountain, while the companions linked and began to weave the seal. It was paramount that each flow be woven precisely, so this was delicate work, the kind of work where one wrong move is deadly. The weaves were then anchored into 7 ta'angreal made of quendia. These seals were circular discs with the black and white symbol of the Aes Sedai engraven upon them, and they were nigh on impossible to destroy. Quendia, also called Heartstone, was a material that absorbed any force used against it and strengthened itself further. Even the One power could not unmake Quendia. It was considered prime material for this particular need. Lews Therin's forces were lucky. The Shadow had not anticipated such a move once they had their enemy cornered. At the moment, the Forsaken, the Dark One's greatest servants, were gathered within the pit of Shayol Ghul to bow before their master. When the bow was sealed, they were trapped inside. So in one stroke, the forces of the light landed a great blow to their enemy. The forces of the shadow, deprived of their generals and the Dark One's touch, could be easily routed and defeated. This was a great victory, and the people swelled with joy as Lews Therin's name was passed among them with great reverence. He had already been a hero, but now he was so much more. He was a savior. War is terrible, and men must become terrible to wage it. When wars end, the sun breaks through the clouds and people just want to live their lives. It's this euphoric feeling when you look forward and realize that the whole messy affair is wrapping up and that you are still alive, free to do whatever you will with your life. It's a great feeling. It's a pity that it didn't last long for these guys. The Dark One might have been defeated in a way, but greater disaster was on the horizon.